Derick, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
US Army veteran, you're a life coach and a trainer. So we'll start off with the Army. What initially motivated you to join the military, and how did your experiences shape your growth as a person?
Great question. So the reason I got into the Army, I grew up as a skinny kid. I was bullied. I had a stuttering issue. I had bad posture. I was always fearful and scared, and just had a lot of crazy things happen in my childhood. I saw a lot of violence, being around alcoholics and drugs and all that. So I knew that I needed to get out of my comfort zone and that the military was going to help me long term. So a huge reason was to overcome those fears that I had as a kid and teenager. So I knew fear of heights, jumping out of planes and helicopters, public speaking, etc. And so I knew that I needed that mental and physical challenge because I was not always this way. I used to be that scared little timid boy who was bullied at school, beat up, violence at home, and etc. So I knew that that was going to be my inlet to make that progression in life that I wanted to. And before I joined, my step one into personal development was fitness, because my physicality, I just had really bad posture and just was always uptight and scared and nervous. I was that kid. So step one was to build that physique, which gave me the mental confidence. And then I started getting better from there at things. But I knew deep down long term that the military was going to help me. And I made a decision to get in to have it on the resume, have skills, and use that for future opportunities. So I never had an idea that I wanted to do 20 plus years. Also, my father was U.S. Army for about 25 years. So I would wake up seeing him be up early, running, going to the gym, leading people and all that. So I always loved that camaraderie and just that early wake up time and leading by example. So definitely to face my own fears and to just become a better man inside and out.
Why is it so important to face your fears and not be somebody who shies away from a challenge?
So definitely so the individual can see their potential, because it's nearly impossible for somebody to know their potential until they push past fear. So an example could be public speaking. If somebody has crippling social anxiety and they start raising their hand in the classroom or at work, they have the answer, but they're really hesitant to answer, and somebody else gives the right answer and they're like, dang, I knew that answer. So those small moments. So if it is fear of public speaking for that person in front of groups, classmates, coworkers, an audience, whatever the case may be, once they start to do that, they get their confidence boost and they're like, you know what? I've been holding my tongue for too long, or I haven't been attempting this thing. So definitely number one, for somebody to realize their true potential and get real confidence by actually doing it. Because nowadays, my belief is that society is struggling so much because they're never pushing themselves outside their comfort zone. Everything is too easy nowadays. Uber Eats, DoorDash, Amazon Prime, Netflix, like everything is so fast in your face that many people, they're struggling facing their fears and being disciplined. So once that person pushes past that, they really remind themselves like, wow, I am strong. I can be more confident. So there's no replacement for that discipline or facing those things, because a lot of times people look for liquid courage or other sources or only being around people they know as their comfort, but it's not actually real confidence and real energy for them to see, hey, here's who I am and here's who I can be just by facing those fears.
Presumably in the Army, facing your fears isn't really, it's not really a choice. It's more something that you get pushed to do as part of the process. But for the average person, what is the best way for someone to become more comfortable with facing that kind of fear? Is it one of those where you just have to take the leap, kind of like in the Army where you have someone pushing you to do it? Or does it need to be like a self-imposed thing where they just decide themselves rather than having an external input helping them do that?
Yeah, so you could definitely do both ways. Some people have that inner drive, especially if they were an athlete. They just have that competitive spirit. But if a person did not play sports, wasn't in band, martial arts, or didn't really do anything that was competitive, they might not have that natural fire within them. So that person doesn't mean they can't accomplish those things or overcome, but they just need a team, coach, mentor, an accountability partner, their best friend, teacher, whoever it is that can guide and push them. And they have that accountability to really get to that next level. So yeah, definitely both can help. But step one, if that individual could write out, what actually are my fears? Are they things? Some people are just scared of bugs and snakes and animals. For some, it's crippling social anxiety, speaking on a stage, fumbling in a work setting, getting laughed at, things like that. So really getting clear on what those fears are, because a lot of the times people, they think that fears are only massive extreme things like jumping out of a plane or speaking to 1,000 people at a conference on a stage and just being nervous. A lot of the times those fears are really rare. It's more so the small, subtle stuff that holds people back from pursuing what they actually want to. So definitely writing it out and then asking themselves, do I already have this natural fire in me? Or do I need somebody to help me that they can add some lighter fluid to it? And I know I'm not doing it by myself. So definitely both can work. It just all depends on that person's starting point.
For you, as someone who is in the military, how different is the mindset of people who have gone through that compared to the average person?
100% the sense of urgency. So many military, once you get out or once you're just in public, they realize how much lack of urgency people have. Maybe their family, maybe their old friend, maybe they're in the grocery store and they're just like, why are you on the wrong side of the aisle with the cart? What are we doing here? Or driving, things like that. And people are like, oh, where do I want to go? Left or right? So definitely a huge thing is sense of urgency. So everybody's had a friend, a girlfriend, boyfriend, family member that struggled making a decision on what to eat. Hey, do you want to go to the Italian restaurant this weekend or Greek? I don't know. What do you want? I just asked, like, which one would you like to do? I don't know. Then you get to the restaurant. They're like, what are you going to order? I don't know. Should I have this? And it takes them like 10 minutes to order the food. And so military gets really aggravated in those moments, but they realize how common that is. So most people struggle what to eat. They don't know what to choose from there. So if they can't make small decisions on where to drive to, what to eat on the menu, they're going to struggle with big, major life-changing issues because it's just a repetitive thing. But definitely the mentality, the major difference I've noticed is military just has a higher sense of urgency opposed to most people in society.
It sounds to me like a decisiveness issue. Like a lot of people aren't decisive enough at all with decisions. They like to maybe push them off until the last minute where they have to make a decision. Like, I mean, I'm at university. It's the classic, I've got an essay, so I'm going to leave it until the last night right before and then write all of it immediately rather than planning forward and making a plan and then doing it over time. And it's like there's no sense of urgency, like you say.
Exactly. And a big reason is that most of society struggles with their attention. They don't really have control of what they give attention. So an example could be social media. Everybody's been there where we mindlessly scroll. 30 minutes goes by and they're like, how the heck did I end up on this page? And they're like, what have I been doing? I clicked on one video and went here, went down a rabbit hole. And next thing you know, you're watching a funny dog video and you were just researching like a workout for the day. And you're like, I don't even know how I ended up here. But everybody's done that. But now human beings have a lower attention span than ever in human history. Like we're just all over the place. Netflix notification, email notification, the friend texts you, oh, got to be here. And it's hard for people to just breathe and actually be present. So that's definitely the biggest issue nowadays. People lack presence and their attention span. They're always thinking about either the what if of the future or the stress of the past. It's hard for them to be present. And when they are present, they're just on their phone and they're not present with the person. And so when it comes to making decisions for their goals, it's really difficult because they're always in a pattern of past, future, what if, or I'm stressed, let me scroll. So once they can break that pattern, they can be more present, take the power back and really say, you know what? These devices don't control me. I use them to my advantage.
How could somebody hone that decisiveness trait essentially and have a more military mindset to their decision making where they're much more able to make difficult decisions on the spot rather than, or not on the spot, obviously you'd want to think about it, but in a more logical way that's less wishy-washy and more I'm just going to make a decision here and now kind of way?
The number one process would honestly be to first eliminate things. So opposed to adding to their routine, changing their schedule is to eliminate things. So an example could be many people, they hit snooze 4 to 5 times every single morning. The alarm goes off, they're like 10 more minutes, 5 more minutes. And they hit it 3 to 5 times. And next thing you know, once they get up, they're stressed, they have anxiety, they're late, they're annoyed, they're pissed off, they forget something when they leave the house. And it's just like a trickle effect of annoyance. And all day long, they're just like, shit, it's not even 10 a.m. and I'm already annoyed. And then in that moment, everybody calls, emails, and texts them. And they're just like, could I get 10 minutes to myself? So with that being said, I'm a big component of morning routines, but setting up the morning routine to only do 2 things. Nowadays, it's popular to like do all these 10 different modalities for longevity and mindfulness. And yes, those things can work, but I always challenge people to do 2 things, one for the body and one for the mind. Go on a walk, run, hit the weights, whatever that person's exercise is. And then after the workout, something for the mind, prayer, meditation, visualization, journaling, whatever they like to choose. But they'll notice that once they start their day with that, they could do all that within an hour or within an hour and a half, however they want to do it. And they're going to be way more proactive in the day, calm and confident. But if they went with their normal route of they're late, they drank coffee before they had water, their heart rate is up, they can't function, they're dehydrated, and they just feel all over the place. When it's decision time, they struggle because all morning they've just been like all over the place. So I definitely recommend people, step 1, ask themselves, what could I get rid of? What could I eliminate? Maybe it's the snooze button. Maybe it's too much sugar. Maybe it's not enough water, alcohol, unnecessary naps, whatever their thing is. It doesn't always have to be unhealthy or toxic. And then the second thing is, what is that person's morning routine? Do they wake up and they lay in bed for 30 minutes and just scroll and they have no control of what they're going to see? Or do they get up intentional and say, I'm going to drink water, walk the dog, drink the coffee, work out? But it definitely just starts with that morning flow. So that way they're proactive rather than just reactive to everything. So in the moment of the decision, they'll make the best decision to get a better outcome, opposed to just being like, I haven't even controlled the whole morning, so I don't know what to choose now. And I've noticed that that's very common for people. You could see by their body language that they're just stressed, and a lot of it can be self-imposed. Life can happen around us, but a lot of it is just the basics of their morning, where they wake up at a different time every single day, and they either train, they don't train, nothing is consistent. So that morning consistency of the wake-up time to moving the body to opening the mind, that will 100% help them, but actually like living that.
Would you say that waking up early would be an important proponent of that, to be able to have that kind of time to yourself, or does it not really matter as long as you're getting those 2 things in?
Yeah. Number 1, it depends on their schedule. Some people work midday, some people work nights, but if they have a normal work schedule, like they go to bed at normal hours of the day, then I would recommend an earlier wake up time. But the intent of the wake up time is not to just like challenge themselves to wake up at 4 or 5. If they want to, awesome. But it's more so, what can I do in the morning to control my morning, which increases the probability to control the day. So then once life happens at work, school, whatever their thing is, they make way better decisions because they're just calm and confident, because they've at least taken care of themselves. Like as a cliche saying goes, in an airplane, we have to put on our mask before we help anybody else. That's essentially how I see the morning routine, opposed to just, oh, look, I'm late, let me drive to Starbucks, get this artificial frappuccino, go to work, now I'm dehydrated, and then they feel like they're struggling or their sugar levels are like this all day.
Are there any other particular skills or values you've learned from your military service that would be useful for people to implement into their life, career, things like that?
Yes, definitely. The number 1 would be leadership. As a good leader, no matter if the person is a parent, a professor, teacher, whoever they lead, is that when you have the ability to push your own pride and ego out of the way, you can serve your team, your students, your customers, your clients, your audience even better. So being able to push that pride and ego out of the way to say, you know what, on today's agenda for my team, we were going to do this, but I can tell that their body language is stressed from the week. So let's do something that relieves the stress real quick before we talk about the meeting of our numbers, KPIs, whatever that work setting is. But a good leader can identify their body language and say, all right, there's no point in us talking about numbers because I'm going to drop their morale. They're going to be stressed and it's just going to be a long day for everybody. So let me flip it and say, you know what? Let's do something fun. Let's all go for a walk. Let's all do a round robin, whatever they want to do to just break that mold, and then talk about the numbers and say, hey, last week we sucked. We didn't hit any sales numbers. What are we going to do to change this? But in the beginning, the first 5 to 10 minutes, they did something that was team building, boosted everyone's morale, opposed to just starting off with the meeting, because that is just going to drop everyone's morale within 1 to 2 minutes, saying, it's going to be a long day. But if they started with the right approach, it's going to be much better. But again, step one for that leader is they can only do it if they push pride and ego aside. Because if not, they're going to be like, hey, last week we didn't do this. We need to do this by the end of the month. And they're just adding the pressure, which doesn't help anybody in the moment. So definitely leadership to elevate the team morale. Do you have the skills to elevate the people around you? Or is that person just a reactive boss or manager that's just micromanaging and stressing everybody out, and they never get a good outcome with their team?
Is there a difficult balance to strike between being more laid back and trying to make people feel confident, but also trying to also make sure things get done and things are done on time? Because I imagine, I guess, in the army that of course there was a level of trying to have good camaraderie and stuff like that, but when push came to shove, you have to sometimes knuckle down. How difficult is that balance to strike, and how do you find that in a good leader? How would they find that balance between the two?
There's a saying that goes, too much kindness breeds a lack of accountability. Too much kindness breeds a lack of accountability. And so essentially, the person that doesn't make exceptions as much, because once you make an exception to your friend, to your coworker, let's say you're in school and there's a group project, there's always that one person in the group project that doesn't do anything. They always have some crazy life story. Oh yeah, my grandma and this and that. They always come up with something, and then you got to pick up their workflow. And the next thing you know, you did 90% of the project because you want to get an A and pass, and they still get an A, but they didn't provide anything. So with that being said, that's a common one at work or in school. But sometimes we just got to be like, hey, you said you're going to do your part. I'm doing this. They're doing that. And just be more direct and concise. But speaking about the outcome, so that person doesn't feel that you're just like calling them out or whatever. Sometimes you need to. If you got to crack the whip, you got to crack the whip. But that's always last resort. But in the beginning is making sure that everybody's on the same team, where you say, hey, I'm going to do this part. If you do that part, you're better at that than me. We can meet in the middle, and then we both crush this project. How does that sound? They're confident because you acknowledge that they're good at this. You acknowledge what you're good at, and then you work together as a team. But definitely making sure that we're not too nice, and we're not trying to be an asshole to people. We're just being honest, so that way people don't walk all over us, because that tends to happen a lot with friendships, relationships, especially work, professional setting. Is there's a manager or a leader that's too nice. They make an exception once. Now everybody wants that little exception. And then next thing you know, that leader's so annoyed that they're about to snap on people or cause a scene, or they lower their morale. And then they're like, wow, I have no control. They're running the office instead of the one that's in charge, just because they were too nice in the beginning. Another thing that can help is setting expectations and deadlines. So expectations on both ends, and also making sure that whoever's the leader is setting high standards for themselves. They're the walking example. They show up early, they leave late. In the Army, we say your soldiers eat first, leaders eat last, and making sure that they get taken care of in any setting. Hey, what do you need from me to make this better? Is there anything you need from me to make that easier? And just really asking those questions. Even if they don't need anything, they appreciate the leader who actually legitimately, genuinely asks the question and say, hey, what do you need? You're the expert in that. I don't know exactly what you're doing, but how can I help? And so that approach just helps so much. But big picture is just making sure we can boost the morale, because there's too many people that are miserable in group settings or at work or in school because of lack of communication, and the leader lost control. So somebody in the classroom that thinks they're the leader, they're trying to run it or the business, because the actual leader is just like too soft and too nice. And again, we're not trying to be angry or mean, but it's just that expectation in the beginning can help so much.
So it's about being adaptable, essentially, to any scenario that comes your way.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Another thing that you could say about the military is that the difference is that you're outside a lot and you get a lot of exposure to nature. And I guess you could say that a lot of people these days don't have that kind of practical application of going outside and having to do things by themselves. Do you think there's a lack of skills in the current generation of being able to fend for themselves? And do you think men would appreciate and could do with learning those kind of skills?
Oh, yes. Yeah, 100%. So I like to look at it in regards to people's family tree. So let's just say somebody had a grandpa that taught him how to cut the grass, taught him how to use this lawn care equipment, taught him how to do something with their hands. in regards to outdoors, that can definitely help. And teaching the younger generation, like I don't have kids, but when I do have a teenager client, or even when I was in college and high school, I would teach martial arts classes, but I would always make sure to show them by example and be that father figure where their parents are like, wow, my son never pays attention. Like, how'd you get him to focus for an hour? Like he's always running around. And then I show them what I did and they're like, oh, that's a good approach. But I would just try to meet the kid, the teenager, the man where they're at, and to just teach them something that'll help them feel their confidence. Because when you make a man feel powerful through his work and make him feel confident, then he just starts to radiate different type of energy, and then he respects you as a leader, and it's just a win-win for everybody. You see him proud of himself and happy, you're proud, and the next thing you know, you're like, all right, this is great. Because in the beginning, maybe you bumped heads. So it's just all about assessing the situation. But yeah, definitely do believe that a lot of men are lacking these skills because of the generation that we're in now. Not saying this generation is bad, but everything is just so fast and digital that most men struggle with patience. They have no patience or discipline, so they want it now. I want it now. I'm working out, but I'm not down 20 pounds or 10 kilos. Or the guy's been going on dates, but he can't find his goal woman, or whatever that guy's working on. Or I'm studying, but I'm still not done with my college courses. Just that real discipline and patience, it's lacking. But the goal is for that man to become that person that just emulates the man that he wants to be. So anybody that does have the skills, I always recommend that the men teach that to other guys around them and just be that example. Because when they see a man that's on a mission, we can't lie. Like we got to respect the man that's just on a mission. He has that look in his eye. I don't care if he's 4 foot or 6'8", doesn't matter his ethnicity or gender or anything. But in regards to where he's at, it's just inspiring to see a man on a mission. And if somebody is that man, make sure they're teaching others and not just trying to be that lone warrior or that lone wolf.
Did you have any role models who helped guide you specifically to that kind of mindset that you have now?
Yeah, so definitely my father. I saw him always leading by example, never miss a day of work unless he had like an infection or unless he was vomiting or actually legitimately sick. But in general, it's just always being the first one there to help those people, whether as soldiers or in business. And just that discipline of, hey, if something's going on personal, things have to get done. That comes first. People depend on us. And so just that, not just military mentality, but just that old school male mentality of we're the providers, we're the protectors, and we're here to serve. No matter what industry somebody's in. Can you provide? Can you protect? And can you serve? So nowadays, some men, they can't provide. Maybe they can provide financially, but they can't protect. They wouldn't know what to do in an actual setting in public when a guy with a knife runs into the restaurant. Like, can that man actually save his family? Does he know what to do, or does he just freeze up? And then the last one is, can they actually serve? Like, are they making a positive impact? Because I've noticed that it's common for men to only choose one of those. He has the money, but he can't fight. He can fight, but he has no money. Or he tries to lead, but he's not even disciplined and he's trying to lead people. But making sure that we have all three, protect, provide, and serve, that's one of the best traits that a man can have. And I just keep it simple. Going back to the old school way of showing, like, the reason why things come together is there's always one man that makes a decision and leads by example. When there's chaos, one man has to step up. So like this new woke culture, like all the stuff that's happening in the media and just these last couple of years, yeah, it sounds cool, whatever. But who actually takes care of business when there's trauma happening, when there's a crisis, when a fire is happening? Like, who do they call? The man that doesn't show fear, the man that gets things done. And people tend to forget that. So when there's real things happening, one person has to step up. And when that person steps up, people see that and they're like, oh, shoot, this is what a man is. And it doesn't matter their size or background, anything. It's just like one man shows up and takes care of his people. And I feel like that is missed and forgotten about until they need a call for help. And then who do they need? The man that can handle things.
Yeah, I was going to say the word toxic masculinity gets thrown around quite a bit these days. I was going to ask, do you necessarily think it's always a bad thing? And is it actually a useful trait potentially in high stress and high stakes environments?
Yeah, so I have two perspectives. Perspective one, this statement used to never exist. That's the funny thing about this statement. It used to never exist. Now it's trending because of media, celebrities, etc., and people want to feel part of a group to feel some fake sense of power. So when people look at the history of these phrases, a lot of times it used to not exist 10 years ago. I like to look at when did this start popping up? When did masculinity become toxic? Because at the core being, most people can't even explain that. They're like, oh, toxic masculinity, what does that mean? But if they show somebody that is very extreme, that degrades women and is just violent and just angry and just very negative, then yeah, that's pretty toxic. We don't want to emulate that. But on the flip side, a lot of people, they can't accept when somebody's open, honest, and blunt. If somebody's open, honest, and blunt, it might not be the best approach in every setting, but at least they know what they're going to get. They're black and white. Because most of society now, they're in a gray zone. They never speak their mind. They do it on the internet. They have these opinions and stuff, but they're not the ones that actually change the world or make an impact or save lives. But they have a lot of opinions that they put out. So I just like to think of the history. Toxic masculinity, that phrase was never viral or trending until like these past 5 to 10 years. Before that, nobody was really mentioning it. Everybody's had a toxic male in their life, a teacher, an uncle, a dad. So knowing his traits is usually alcoholism. Usually they're out of shape. Usually they don't have money and they're just very toxic and negative. So yes, that could be toxic masculinity. But as a whole, I've noticed that there's been a shift with basic things of men being men and taking care of business, protecting, serving, and providing, that like some people call that toxic. But all they're saying is, I'm not accountable for my actions. I don't want anybody to call me out. So I'm going to call that toxic. When they make me aware of I've been lazy, I haven't shown up, or whatever they're missing, I've noticed that that's very common now. It's like they get triggered, quote unquote, when somebody's just being honest. It's like, hey, be totally blunt. The reason this guy is 50 pounds overweight is because he's been drinking too much beer doing this. And that's all it is. He's not making fun of him. He's just like, hey, this is where you're at. Let's get better. If he's open to change, he appreciates that. But what's happening now in society is like, oh, you shouldn't say that to him. It's like, why? He has a son. Now his son is going to be obese. And it's like trickling down the family tree. So again, I just like to see things in multiple perspectives. But I do believe that at the core, leadership is needed now more than ever, especially good men. Because the biggest issues in the world happen because of lack of good men. When a girl does not have a father in her life, things tend to happen. She might go different paths. If a son doesn't have his father in his life, things tend to happen. He goes down a different path. Even if somebody doesn't have kids, if he's a good leader, he can be somebody's father figure. Maybe you have a cousin, a nephew, the little kid that lives down the road. They're like, man, I see him go on a run. Like, man, he's always going to work. And he sees that male, maybe his dad's never worked out in 5 years. And he sees you running down the street every day. You are that positive male role model, and maybe he's never even talked to you. So I just like to think of these things and challenge men to just stand up and not get too caught up in the trending statements.
Yeah, I think the archetype that has ended up spreading this idea that all masculinity is toxic is probably Andrew Tate, which I don't agree with, like a lot of what he says. I think what he does is he reels people in by saying stuff that's fairly obvious, like you should probably exercise or you should try and make a business, which is fine, cool. But then that reels the 15-year-olds in, who then end up watching all the rest of his content, which is just some wild statements. But I've got the definition of toxic masculinity here. It says toxic masculinity is used in academic and media discussions to refer to aspects of masculinity that are socially destructive, misogyny, homophobia, and violent domination. And I feel like that's quite the ends and extremes of the topic, and I feel like a lot of stuff that's framed that way just isn't as bad as the definition that it gives.
Exactly.
The problem is, I feel like there's this current generation of boys a lot of them have been raised without good father figures, so you've ended up with just this vacuum of no actual good male role models. So then someone like Andrew Tate takes advantage of that and goes, well, they don't have anybody else to look up to or to listen to, and he cashes in through that outlet, which is where if you did, and that might be partly due to the demonization of men in certain media. I was reading a study recently about the way men are portrayed in sitcoms, and a lot of the time there's never really a good male characters where they're like, oh, the guy is good because he's like a good dad or like he's like strong or whatever. They're normally portrayed as like a deadbeat. It's the Homer Simpson trope. It's that they're portrayed as a deadbeat who's a bit of a dunce, and and I think that general idea of kids like watching TV and never actually seeing like a guy who's a good father, I think, is important. Obviously there's people like Captain America or Spider-Man you can look up to, especially when you're 5 or 6. But like as a father, there aren't actually many good examples of that in TV and media, which is probably a big problem that people don't really address.
Yeah, 100%, man. And not to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but I used to break these topics down. And during quarantine, I was explaining a lot of this because I could see the pattern of what was happening. So a lot of what's happening in media and Hollywood, a lot of the stuff, no matter how somebody feels, but they're just pushing agendas to get this stuff into the kids' minds. They're not targeting you and I. They're not targeting adults. They're targeting kids. So just seeing that the dad in every show is usually fat and drinking beer and complaining about work. And they make that so normalized that maybe their dad or uncle's the same way. And then it's like, they haven't seen anything. So like I grew up watching Rocky with my dad. I grew up seeing my dad go on runs. I grew up watching Rambo. And I'm not saying like violence is the thing, but a masculine male who's taking care of business in regards to just leading and going from there, and just seeing that the big picture is that boys and teens need to see, okay, this guy's saying to get in shape and make more money and have skill sets. Yes, that's amazing. But when they start showing anger towards the opposite sex, when they start showing that aggression, they're usually covering up a broken heart, mommy issues with the ex, and they're using that. And now all these boys have this mentality of F women get money and blah, blah. And then they're 2 years later, they're like, I can't have a relationship. And then they have this anger towards the opposite sex. So like that's a ripple effect that's happening. And the same thing in reverse with many teenage girls. They're just listening to this toxic music saying, we don't need a man. I'm an independent woman. F men. And it's like, you got this side of the boys listening to these guys. We don't need them. And you got this side of the girls listening to them. And now it's like, they're breaking the family at its core. Everything that's happening right now is just to break up the family dynamic. We're supposed to hate women. They're supposed to hate us. So what are we supposed to do? Never get married, never have kids or family. So when people can see that and push their own opinions out of the way, they can see it clear as day. All they're trying to do is break the family tradition. That's all it is. They want me confused, you confused, all of us angry at each other. So nobody wants to have families anymore. And there's all these kids with missing fathers, missing mothers. And it's just a society of lost, broken people. So like big picture, I've noticed that that's what's happening. And even when you mention these things, sometimes people are like, how could you say this? Like, how can you not see this? Like, you turn on anything on Netflix, it's always the same thing. Another common thing that I love that you mentioned shows is that a couple years ago, I stopped watching Marvel movies. So like my girlfriend, she loves Marvel, pretty awesome movies in the past, but I've noticed the shift that now they make the male character weak and they make the female character dominant. And there's nothing wrong with that. Some women are better at some things than men.
Make interesting characters and people will want to watch it. I'm a nerd. I read a lot of comic books. There are so many really cool, interesting female characters in comic books with really cool backstories, like Captain Marvel. But for some reason, they felt like they had to jump too far forward. Like imagine Iron Man was already the most powerful guy that he was right at the end, right at the beginning. At the beginning, he was flawed, he was a bad person, etc. And you see his growth. But it annoys me that the female characters are immediately the best and at everything, and they never get anything wrong. And I'm like, that's not anyone being misogynistic. That's just writing bad stories that aren't interesting. That's the problem.
100%. Man, you hit the nail on the head. And I love that you see that perspective because it's so rare for somebody to see that. And also, the reason I always bring up different perspectives is so people can take a second to really just listen and see it from a bird's eye view. Because sometimes they'll take a 30-second clip. Oh, he said this or he said that. It's like, wait a minute. There's 3 more minutes of what he was saying to that. Just listen to that. But yeah, I 100% agree with you. What the kids are watching, what they're listening to impacts them, especially if they don't have the father figures or mother figures in their life. They're looking outwardly. Musicians, actors, actresses, athletes, whoever's popular or trending, or somebody in their local community. And so going back to the boys, I also like to recommend that the boys or the teenagers or whoever it is, a guy in college, he's struggling with relationships. Is he taking women advice from a guy that's not married and in a loving relationship? I've noticed that that's a common thing. Like some of my male clients, they struggle with relationships, but they've been taking advice from all these like alpha males who've had 3 divorces. I'm like, we got to just look at the part. Like, why is that thing? He crushes it in business, but Why can't he keep a relationship? There's an internal pattern that's from the past. Maybe there's a vice, things like that. So really taking a step back for men to say, who am I actually listening to? Let me look at their life. Are they just a good marketer and it's clickbait to sell some BS? Or are they speaking from life experiences? So there's a huge line right there that guys miss. Because as you mentioned earlier, some of these guys will drop nuggets, get in shape, get some skill sets, provide, blah, blah, cool. But then everything else they say is just for clickbait to sell you some stuff. And then 14-year-old Jimmy, he's like, oh yeah, F women, get money. Yeah, okay. And now he has that mentality and now he's abusive and it started a cycle. So it's sad to see, but on the good side is that real men, once they step up, that boy, that teenager is like, wow, this guy's calm and confident, intelligent, providing value to others. This is different. Wait a minute. He's not hyper aggressive for no reason. He can get aggressive and violent if need be, but there's no reason to be that way 24/7.
How do you become self-aware enough to be able to filter the external opinions of and determine which voices and opinions to listen to and which ones to ignore?
Great question. So I would always recommend that somebody ask themselves, am I crystal clear on what I want in life? My goal, physique, finances, career. How does that person want to give back to the world? Do they want to help kids, animals, the elderly, medical? Do they want to help military veterans? Do they want to help people that are struggling with something? Whatever they want to do, but getting crystal clear and being specific. So on the flip side, it's very common for people to say, I want to be rich, wealthy, and in love. Sounds great, but they don't really give you a real reason. It's not specific. So there's no rush to it. It's like, I want to be rich, wealthy, and in love and successful. And it's kind of just like a statement that just lingers in the air, but there's no definite reason and there's no definite specific thing that they want. So I always recommend that people get more specific on what they want. Like, okay, you want the money. What amount per month? What amount per year? What do you want to do with the money? Where do you want to live? Do you want a family? Do you not want kids? Do you want a ton of dogs in your backyard or 2 kids? Like whatever it is, getting crystal clear on everything and just using that imagination. Because once somebody can do that, they feel more excitement because they know they have this clear vision of what they want to do. So an analogy is the athlete. The athlete envisions the sporting event, the game, sprinting across the finish line, running, hitting the final shot in the basketball game, that swing on the golf course, whatever it is. So once they do it and they win, they feel a rush and you can see it in their eyes. They've been thinking about this thing for months and years. And it's the same thing in life, that competitive mentality. When that athlete uses that energy in career, in relationships, in everything that they do in life, things start to fall in place for that person. So I definitely recommend that people, step one, just get more clear on what they want and stop using vague statements of love, rich, wealthy, success. What does that actually mean for them? And then going deeper into it. Because once they have specifics, they can feel some sense of rush for it and they realize what it is. And then after that, once they know what they want to pursue, then when they get advice from people, they can assess, okay, is that an opinion from a family member? Or is that just they're scared that I'm going down a path that nobody in my family tree has ever went down? And they love you, they mean well, but a lot of times they get in people's heads. So their dreams, goals, and aspirations were up here and they started to drop them because uncle, grandma, mom, dad, their friend, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know if you should do this. That's a lot of schooling. Oh, that's college. Or that's a lot of business. Nah, it's not safe. You need to go the safe route. Like they hear all this stuff. And it's really sad that many people in their career now in life, they're not living the life that they wanted. They're living a life that somebody else wanted for them and they're miserable. And then they drink every weekend to escape reality or whatever their vice is. So get crystal clear on what we want. Be very aware of whose opinion you're listening to. But when you're clear on what you want, you less likely allow people to get into your head. And then on the positive side, if somebody does have proof that they've done this thing in whatever industry that is, then they get excited. They're like, wait, there's a better way to do this. There's a faster way. There's a more efficient way. Then it's exciting because that person has actually done what they're aiming to do. And then they have a mentor, coach, whatever that person is for them. But definitely clarity, assessing the person giving advice and making sure that you're not just taking advice from somebody that does not have a life you don't want. So just full transparency. Don't take advice from people you don't want to end up like. It could be family. it is what it is. It's not judging, but some people in your life, they always give advice and like they've been miserable for decades. So sometimes people's insecurities will lash out. Even if they mean it out of love, they're just scared.
In the army, I imagine you got a lot of criticism, mainly constructive, from people trying to help you through that journey. How did you take that criticism on board in a way that didn't also damage your self-esteem if you're constantly being criticized, but using it as a way to fuel you to be better rather than as a personal insult?
The interesting thing on that, my experiences are different than most, but the army was really easy for me because my household, like my mother's German, she's like 5'4". My dad's African American, he's like 6'3". They're crazy as hell. So I used to get my ass beat all the time and yelled at and just all the kind of wild stuff when they were drunk. The next day, hey, you ready for church? Want to go have breakfast? Like from the age of 11 to 17, that crap would happen. So when I got into the army, when I had drill sergeants yelling in my face, I almost busted out laughing because in my head, I was like, dang, my mom would take all of you guys out. Like my dad would destroy all of you. So I was actually prepared for it and it was funny. So when I was in those environments, I was just calmest one. And that's why I was chosen as a leader because they're like, dang, we can't get in his head. Why can't we get in his head? And I'm just thinking, I'm like, I'm used to this. Most nights of my life, I was around drunk ass, crazy people. So this is a walk in the park. So for me, it was a different approach. It didn't really bother me. But what I did, I could see who never had this kind of stress. And I would help those people. So what I would do for those soldiers, it'd say, hey, this is a game. This is all a mental game to see if you're going to quit or shut down. Keep that in mind. This is a game. So when you're dehydrated, you're hungry, you haven't slept in 3 days, and you still got to push yourself, you got to remind yourself that this is a game. This is just preparing us for a real life scenario. And so being there to help those people. So in my perspective, in my experience, it was more so helping the people that were scared and helping the people that have never experienced these things and just giving them that perspective to say, hey, this is a training environment. You're going to become more confident in a couple of weeks. So when these things do happen, you're going to react so much calmer to real life situations.
Was there any particularly difficult moments whilst you were deployed that really tested your mindset and resolve?
Yeah, so definitely in cold weather training. So as a child, I lived in Germany, so I'm used to the cold and I love the cold. In middle school, we moved to the United States. We moved to Florida. So Florida, obviously hot, humidity and everything else. I currently live in Florida, so I'm used to the cold. I'm used to the heat. And with that, you get to see whose body was never prepared for it. So an example, somebody that lives in the mountains, they come to Florida that's sea level and they have to go run. They can barely breathe because of the thick air, the humidity. Same thing with people that live by the ocean. They go to the mountains, they can't breathe because of lack of oxygen. So really seeing where your people are from and what can help them. And so from there is definitely cold environment training people were not prepared for. For the heat, some people would pass out sometimes, but they would learn electrolytes, water intake, basic things, pretty common knowledge. But in the cold, that's when I noticed that more soldiers would really struggle because a lot weren't from the cold areas. So people would have hypothermia. People wouldn't know these little tricks that you can do to stay warm, heating up your wrists, your ankles, making sure you cover your hands and ears. Those little things, if somebody has had zero experience, it's just making sure that they know what to do to stay healthy and honestly just stay alive. So cold training environments, I've noticed. So like some of the toughest male and female soldiers I knew, the times that they were tested the most were in cold weather. You're sweating, your uniform's wet, and it's under 0 degrees and you're just shaking and you got to hold your rifle in training environment and just like still be focused on the mission. What can you do in that moment to not allow Mother Nature to beat you? So 100% for myself, those experiences were cold weather training where you would see who can take over and still lead and who shuts down or who just needs help to be able to push through.
Yeah, that mentality, I think a lot of people have missing. I think a lot of people have like a woe is me mentality. They'll be put in a difficult position and immediately think, oh God, why is this happening to me? So do you think that we have as a society more of a focus on victimhood, and how do you think that's impacted people's ability to be more resilient these days?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And now we just need more leaders to step up to show the example of their story. Going back to what you mentioned of the backstory of a main character, when we know somebody's story, That's the only reason we're motivated, by a book, by a series, by a comic book, by somebody's autobiography, by somebody's life story from a YouTube video or a conversation. Once we can learn their backstory, they're like, oh, this is why he is the way he is. This is why she is the way she is. And we can see a little bit of ourselves in them, and something clicks. We're like, there's a shift. They didn't quit. Because usually they see the end results. Oh, lucky for him, he's military. Oh, lucky for her, she grew up with rich parents. Oh, lucky for them. Must be nice, must be nice. We hear all these things, but once they learn that person's backstory, they're like, this makes sense why they chose this path. So maybe like in your path, you chose this path because of some upbringing. You're a kid, you open up a book, like some experience happened to make you choose the path it is. And I've always thought that that was the most interesting thing. So from a leadership standpoint, I just want people to start telling their story more, because it can impact people so much. The only reason we read books and watch movies and shows is because of stories. Everybody loves a comeback story. So the analogy and the mentality is, this is part of my comeback story. I'm stressed right now. I have anxiety, depression. I'm in a dark place. This is part of my comeback story. He just got his heart ripped out by an ex, like whatever the scenario is. This is part of my comeback story. And really getting into that inner superhero mode of, hey, right now I'm in the dungeon. Right now I'm in the basement doing the work, learning about myself, forging that and changing that mentality. But yes, 100%, the victim mentality is popular because social media. So the shift in these past couple of years that happened is everybody wants attention and everybody wants to feel like they have a voice of power. Freedom of speech is amazing. I'm all for it. But there's a thin line of people just saying their opinions and thinking that that holds weight when it doesn't help anybody. So now other people that are also hurt, insecure, and broke, they join these groups and they all just bash people, but it doesn't provide any value to the world. It doesn't elevate the kids, doesn't help anybody. It's just like hurt people, and misery loves company. And I've noticed it's very common nowadays, where you could post a picture of the sunset. Oh, the first sunset here because it's been raining in Wales for 2 weeks straight. Amazing sunset. Somebody could comment on Facebook, well, we can't all be lucky to have a beautiful sunset. And you're just like, what? I just post a picture of the sunset or the sunrise. Like, how did you make that negative? Well, we can't all live in Wales. We can't all be in Florida. And it's just sad to see where people are at. So it's so common. But the good news is that when we start telling our stories, we start making a shift. You get that message, you get that email, somebody sees you in person. Hey, man, I saw your post. Or, hey, I listened to your podcast. I never knew that about you. Like, no wonder you're that way. And learning people's stories, that's what it's all about. I do believe that that's the number one thing missing is, yes, he or she is a badass, but why are they a badass? Why are they good? Why are they crushing it in life? Learn the backstory.
Yeah, I heard a phrase, someone said that it may not be your fault, but it's part of your life now, so it is your responsibility. And I think that puts it quite well in terms of what your circumstances may not be exactly how you intended, or even your fault, or something that's even a direct consequence of your actions, but it is your life now, so you have to take responsibility of it. So how would you encourage somebody to take ownership, even if it's not what they were hoping for, and use it as a device for personal growth?
So one of my favorite quotes about Tony Robbins is, life is happening for you, not to you. Life is happening for you, not to you. And so with that perspective is, you're good at what you do because you went through something. Even if it wasn't crazy, dramatic, and violent, it could have been something subtle that gave that person the skill or clarity to say, wow, I'm better at this now because I stumbled, because I failed, because I got hurt, because somebody hurt me. Whatever happened, maybe it was self-inflicted. Maybe it came from the outside in, or maybe it was spiritual. Maybe they lack faith and they're just getting spiritually attacked. So whatever happened, what skill or gift did I get from the pain? Trauma gives you gifts. Pain gives you skills. And when you can flip that energy into productive action, that person becomes unstoppable. Because anytime that there is pain, they say, yes, this is real. I'm not pretending that life is unicorn and sunshine and freaking rainbows. Anxiety is real. Depression is real. All these things are real. But how is my response to these things? What will I do from here on? Am I just going to be angry, miserable, and like spew negativity the rest of my life? Or am I going to say, hey, you know what? I can make a change, and I want to show people what I did, whether it's through books, through social media, teaching their kids. But it is all of our job to overcome what we went through and then give back. Overcome what we went through and then give back. And so essentially we're all here to heal ourselves and then heal others. Even if it's not your career, we can all make somebody's day or give somebody that piece of golden nugget, wisdom, whatever they need, that really helps that person to meet them where they're at. But definitely being able to say, this is part of my comeback story. I don't want to live a victim mentality. Maybe I'm at fault. Maybe something else happened. But from here on out, I'm making a pact with myself. I'm drawing the line. I will no longer let my past, a person, or whoever have control of me. And until somebody makes that conscious decision, it literally makes a pact with themselves, they will not look back. Because they say, from here on out, I'm not giving up my power. Yes, life's going to happen, but what is my response going to be? Because if I keep doing this, the historical data says I've been miserable. The historical data says I've been eating too much, drinking too much, staying at home too much, and not being social at all. Everybody has some vice that they go to when they're stressed, but really being honest with yourself and saying, what do I need to work on, and not running from it.
In the army, you probably were surrounded by a lot of people who are similar to yourself with a similar mindset. How can people cultivate a similar network outside of that kind of environment? Can they get from that point of having maybe people around them who are a negative impact to people who are more similar to their mindset?
You could definitely, number one, not every gym, but most gyms, they'll have classes. I would recommend people join a class that they enjoy. So an example, some people love Zumba classes. Some people love CrossFit. Some people love weightlifting. Some, they don't want to train with a group. They want to train with one person. So I would start it with something that's physical. Maybe you and your best friend go hiking every Saturday morning for 2 hours. And that's your thing. Every Saturday morning on the hike, you guys are expressing yourself, what you worked on this week, what you've accomplished, what's pissing you off, what's stressing you. And by the end of the hike, you feel amazing because you mentally released, you moved the body. So having that camaraderie, a fitness class, having an accountability partner you go on walks or hikes with. Another thing could be in the United States, there's an app, also a website. I don't know if it's in other countries, but meetup.com, meetup.com, up.com. Essentially, you can find different groups that meet up in person or via online video that speak about topics. So men's empowerment, guys that never really had a father figure, book clubs, whatever the case may be. There's endless groups. Another thing could be Facebook groups. They can join a digital community that relates to something that they want to be part of. And a lot of the times they can have in-person events. So I would start with the fitness aspect first, something physical, because when you're moving the body and expressing yourself, you're going to have an amazing outcome. The body feels better. You feel good. You got that thing off your chest, and that's going to help a ton. That's what people need the most. Next up is find groups in your area, going to different websites, whatever somebody's into. So if somebody's into art, I would find art groups and meet these people. They're into art. It's easier to connect with them rather than just like going to a restaurant to start talking to people. Some people can do that, but most can be pretty difficult. Another thing would be to go to your local library, public library, or a bookstore and start having a conversation with people and ask them, what is your favorite book in this section, on this aisle? And really just having a genuine conversation opposed to only meeting people at the bar, at the club, or at the restaurant, which usually doesn't have a great outcome. So joining groups, fitness, mindset, whatever you're about, and finding similar like-minded people, that will help a ton.
If someone has anxiety with the idea of going up to people and speaking, especially like joining these kind of classes, and doesn't want to, or is just afraid of entering that new environment, what advice would you give to them to help them overcome that kind of thing?
I would challenge them to, every time that they're in public, give one person a genuine compliment. At the gas station, at the grocery store, genuine compliment. We're not here to hit on people, but just in general. Hey man, nice shirt. But what brand is that? Hey, I see you chose that pasta. Why is the multi-grain different? Why do you like that one better? Oh, my grandma introduced me to this pasta. Whatever the scenario is, genuine question, genuine compliment. Don't have an expectations or outcome you're looking for, but more so, people need to start speaking to strangers more, because we all grew up, don't speak to strangers, which is why most people struggle socially. But if you just approach it with a genuine conversation, genuine compliment in public, something quick. And if somebody's like, I don't know if I can do that, here's the last perspective. You had a bad day, you had a bad moment, you were stressed, you didn't want to be out. Some kid made you smile or laugh. Some old lady made you laugh. Somebody's like, hey, I see you're stressed, can I pray over you? And the person's like, huh, what? And they say, okay. And the person prays over them in the gym parking lot or at the freaking gas station. Whatever positive interaction they had, they get in their car and they almost start crying in a good way. They're like, wow, I didn't realize I needed that positive human interaction with a complete stranger. And because we've received that, somebody made you smile, laugh, whatever it was, or if it was profound and faith-driven, doing that for more people. So we don't have to do everything just monetary. Giving back doesn't always just mean money. Sometimes it's just being that lending ear, listen to people and just give them better compliments and better energy. And last example is, are you an active listener? Are you an active listener? That's one of the rarest things. People that will sit with you and actually listen. Like most people, when somebody's talking, they're just like scrolling their phone, just not even tuned in. The person's so passionate about what they're talking about, the person doesn't give a damn. And another thing could be just acknowledging the person. Let that old lady talk to you for 5 minutes. Maybe she hasn't seen her family in 10 years. They don't live in that city. And you're that person at the gas station that you had 10 minutes and then you just talk to her at the gas station. You just say, hey, nice to meet you. And she's smiling and you're like, dang, she probably legitimately hasn't had a genuine conversation with somebody in years. So you never know what somebody's going through. So genuine compliments can help, and being present with that person. So then when they do go into the group settings, it's not their first time in 3 months being social.
If you could give one piece of advice to people who feel like they're stuck or feel like things like anxiety and depression are keeping them down in the world, what would be your advice, or maybe more than one thing, pieces of advice to turn it around and flourish?
Wake up every morning, and before you complain, bitch, or moan, show some gratitude. Wake up every morning and show gratitude. Whoever or whatever you believe in, say thank you that you even woke up and opened your eyes. Like step one, most of society wake up and instantly complain. Oh, it's Monday. Oh, it's weekend. Oh, you opened your eyes and you're alive. You have all your limbs. You have $1,000 phone. You're connected to Wi-Fi. You have food, water. A bomb is not going off outside. Sometimes we just have to be present and be grateful for what we have, because somebody else would legitimately kill to be in your situation. So take a breather, pause, be grateful for the moments you wake up. Like something that simple. It's so rare for people to do that. They wake up and they just, I don't want to do this. It's like, yo, you woke up, you're blessed, you're fine. Somebody else would love your little stress right now. Like Wi-Fi is slow, chill out, you're alive.
If people want more of you, Derick, where should they look to find you?
They can find me on social media at Fit with Derick 2. That's Derick, or my coaching website is fitwithderick.com. I just like showing real people with real results. And so my whole intent with social media is to plant seeds. Speak on topics that people need and make them think, damn, he was talking to me. I need to stop hitting snooze. I need to stop saying yes all the time, or I need to start working out more. So it's my whole intent, plant seeds to make people stop wasting their potential. I just want to see people win. There's way too many broken people. Life is short. Let's make it amazing.
Thank you for coming on the show.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.